Hey, so tonight we're diving into the final chapter of the book of Ruth, and honestly, it's kind of exciting because this is where the story really comes together. You've got Ruth, this amazing woman, and Boaz, the kinsman redeemer, and their story isn't just about romance between two people, it's a bigger love story too, showing God's love in action. We're going to see redemption, surprises, and how everything falls into place. So stick around, because the last chapter has some really cool twists you don't want to miss. Alright, so let's talk about this really interesting concept in the story, the goal, or as it's often called, the kinsman redeemer. Now, this is kind of a big deal in the cultural and biblical context of the time. Basically, a goal was the nearest living male relative of a family, and he had certain responsibilities. I mean, the way their society was set up, the law, it really made provisions to care for widows and family members who were vulnerable, especially women who had lost their husbands and didn't have children. So if a woman was widowed and childless, her deceased husband's closest male relative had a duty to step in. It wasn't just some casual suggestion, it was a law of grace in a way, designed to protect people and keep family lines going. The role of the goal was multifaceted. First, he could buy back family land that had been sold, often because of debt. This was important because property wasn't just wealth, it was family heritage, it was livelihood, it was identity. Losing it could mean losing a whole connection to your lineage. The kinsman redeemer would step in and buy back that land, keeping it in the family. Second, the goal was also responsible for justice in cases of wrongful death, making sure that blood vengeance was appropriately carried out, that the family member who had been killed wasn't left without justice. And then there was the most famous part of the role, the one that really comes to the forefront in Ruth, which was marrying the widow of a deceased relative to carry on the family name. That's huge because in that society, a family line without a male heir could basically fade into obscurity. So the goal wasn't just protecting property or seeking justice, he was preserving identity, legacy, and life in a very tangible way. Now, here's where it gets really interesting in Ruth's story. Boaz steps in as this goal, but he's not the closest relative, which is kind of a plot twist. There's another man who's closer in blood, so technically, that person has the first right to fulfill the duties of the kinsman redeemer. Boaz recognizes this, and he's very careful and respectful about it. He doesn't just swoop in and claim Ruth. Instead, he follows the proper process, showing integrity and strategy at the same time. I mean, you can almost imagine him thinking, okay, I really want to redeem her, but I've got to do this the right way so that it's recognized publicly and legally. That's key because the story isn't just about him wanting to marry Ruth, it's about the redemption being proper and witnessed, following God's law, and ensuring everyone sees the legitimacy of the act. So when we talk about Boaz as the kinsman redeemer, it's not just a romantic angle, though there's that too. It's this deeper, richer picture of grace and responsibility. Boaz's actions show us that being a goal is about love, protection, justice, and continuity. It's about stepping up when someone's vulnerable, ensuring they're cared for, and honoring the law in a way that builds life rather than tearing it down. And remember, Ruth herself is a Moabite, so there's a cultural and even personal risk involved for Boaz here. He's taking on responsibility not just for a widow, but for someone from outside his immediate cultural community, which adds another layer to the story of redemption. He could have ignored it, walked away, or just taken the land for himself, but he chooses to act out of love and commitment. And here's another layer that's easy to miss if you're just skimming the story. The law allowed the nearest relative to refuse, so it wasn't a forced thing. The goal could say no, and there were procedures for that. But if they did refuse, the opportunity would pass to the next relative. That's why Boaz has to approach the closer relative first. It's about respect, order, and making sure the redemption is legitimate. He can't just override the closest relative, and that builds tension in the story too, because we're wondering, okay, will this guy step up or not? Will Ruth get redeemed? Will Boaz get his chance? It's all part of the unfolding drama, and it's tightly connected to this ancient law that's both protective and redemptive. So when you think about the kinsman redeemer in Ruth, think about it as more than a law. It's a story of mercy, of stepping into someone's life to restore what's lost. Boaz embodies this perfectly. He's honorable, he's strategic, and he's compassionate. He's willing to invest himself, to follow the law carefully, and to ultimately act out of love, not just obligation. And that sets up the rest of the chapter beautifully, because now we understand the stakes and the significance of his actions. Ruth's redemption isn't just personal happiness, it's also social, legal, and deeply rooted in God's provision. And that's why this part of the story matters so much. It's where law, love, and divine providence intersect in a really remarkable way. Okay, now we get to the heart of Ruth chapter 4, and honestly, this part is like watching a carefully planned chess move unfold. Boaz knows exactly what he's doing. So picture this, the city gate. In that time, the gate wasn't just an entrance or exit, it was the hub of city life. Elders would gather there, business deals were made, disputes settled, and it was basically like an outdoor courthouse. And Boaz, he's not just wandering in. No, he strategically positions himself there, knowing the closer relative will pass by. He's literally setting the stage for what's about to happen. Now, here's the clever part, the closer relative doesn't know he's about to be drawn into this. Boaz waits for the perfect moment, then approaches him with, a casual kind of, hey, can we talk for a minute, just enough to get him to step aside. And then, here's the twist. Boaz has 10 elders sitting nearby to witness the conversation. It's subtle, but brilliant. He's thinking ahead. Witnesses will make this completely above board and prevent any chance of someone backing out later. So already, you can see the tension building. The closer relative thinks this is just a normal transaction, but Boaz is about to drop a bombshell. Boaz starts talking about the land that Naomi, Ruth's mother-in-law, had inherited from her deceased husband, Elimelech. He frames it first as a property deal, which is smart. He doesn't throw in the whole marriage part right away, he eases the guy in. It's like, okay, here's a field, you have the first right to redeem it, wanna buy it, and the closer relative is like, yeah, sure, I can do that. But then Boaz adds the twist. Not only do you get the land, but you also have to take Ruth, the widow, as your wife to carry on her deceased husband's name. Wait, what suddenly? This is more than a land deal. Now it's a responsibility, a legal obligation, and a commitment. And you can just imagine the closer relative's reaction. He probably thought, oh, I just want the field. And now Boaz has carefully laid out the full picture. Here's where it gets really interesting, and the closer relative hesitates and says, basically, I can't do this. If I take Ruth and have children to continue the family line, it could mess up the inheritance he's already planned for his own family. He's not being mean. He's just being practical. Right? He's like, I want the land. I don't want the responsibility of marrying Ruth. And honestly, that line hits differently when you think about it. It's like dating someone who's only after the perks, not the person. Boaz, of course, knew this could happen, so the plan is unfolding exactly how he hoped. The closer relative essentially backs out, giving Boaz the green light. Now comes a cultural twist that's wild if you're reading this casually. To confirm the redemption transaction, they do this sandal exchange. One man takes off his sandal and gives it to the other. It's like, okay, legally, this seals the deal. The closer relative gives his sandal to Boaz, saying, you go ahead, redeem it yourself. It's a very visual way to say, I'm stepping aside. Boaz has thought through every little step, making sure it's official, witnessed, and irreversible. I mean, can you imagine watching this play out? The tension, the strategy, the patience. It's like watching someone play 3D chess. And throughout all this, Boaz isn't just clever, he's also incredibly kind and respectful. He frames everything in a way that's considerate but also tactically brilliant. He doesn't humiliate the closer relative, he doesn't shame him, he just lays out the law and gently but firmly guides the process. The elders sitting there are nodding, witnessing every word, making sure the community sees that this is legitimate, it's public, it's legal, and it's righteous. Boaz is combining love, strategy, and faith in a way that's just so well executed. The suspense is real too. You're sitting there, imagining. Will this work? Will Boaz get the chance to marry Ruth? Will the redemption happen? And every small step, the approach, the casual conversation, the initial land discussion, the revelation of Ruth's involvement, the hesitation of the closer relative, the sandal exchange, it's all building toward this dramatic, satisfying resolution. You can practically feel the anticipation in the city gate. With the elders watching and the townspeople maybe peeking in. It's a really cinematic moment, even though it's all just conversation and legal formalities. And what's cool about this is that the story doesn't just focus on the action, it also shows character. Boaz's patience, his wisdom, his respect for the law, and his love for Ruth are all shining through. He's not rushing, he's not being impulsive. He's making sure everything is done correctly, and that's part of why this story is so compelling. It's about strategy meeting integrity and love meeting responsibility. So, by the end of this chapter, Boaz has successfully navigated a tricky situation. He's made sure that Ruth is legally and socially redeemed, that the inheritance laws are respected, and that everything is witnessed properly by the elders. And all of this is done with a mix of cleverness, kindness, and foresight. The chapter really is a masterclass in how to combine faith, love, and strategy. It's not just a story about marriage, it's a story about redemption, about doing the right thing in a way that honors everyone involved, and about how careful planning and integrity can bring about something beautiful. Alright, so now we get to one of the more, quirky, but actually really meaningful customs in the story. This whole sandal thing. It might sound odd at first, but stick with me because it's actually pretty clever. Back in the day, when a kinsman redeemer stepped in to redeem a widow or a piece of land, one way to make the transaction official was for one man to remove his sandal and give it to the other. It was like saying, okay, I'm stepping aside, I'm giving up my right, kind of visual. Right? No paperwork, no contracts, just a simple, powerful symbol, and it worked because everyone understood what it meant. So picture the scene. Boaz has approached the closer relative about redeeming Ruth and Naomi's land. The closer relative had initially seemed interested in the land, but then realized, oh wait, if I marry Ruth, it's going to complicate my inheritance. He wants the field, not the responsibility of taking Ruth as his wife. So he basically says, I can't do this. Boaz, you take it, and that's when the sandal comes into play. He takes off his sandal and hands it to Boaz. In that single gesture, the right to redeem the land and marry Ruth is officially transferred. I mean, think about it. Imagine if in today's world we just handed over a shoe instead of signing a legal document. It's a little funny, but it makes total sense in context. It's clear, visible, and undeniable. Now, Boaz doesn't just rely on this symbolic act. He's smart enough to involve the elders of the city. 10 elders sitting there, watching everything unfold. This isn't just formality. It's like when you have witnesses for a big life event today, a wedding, closing on a house, or even signing a big contract. Having people see it happen ensures there's no confusion, no room for someone to change their mind later. Boaz wants this redemption to be indisputable, public, and above board. And in doing so, he's also showing respect to everyone involved, from Naomi and Ruth to the community itself. So the elders are there, watching, and Boaz announces everything officially. He says, basically, everyone. See, here I have redeemed the land from Naomi, and I have also acquired Ruth the widow as my wife, to perpetuate the name of her deceased husband. And the people, you can imagine them, probably nodding, murmuring in agreement, maybe even whispering. Finally, it's happening. The whole town is witnessing this beautiful moment of justice, love, and continuity all rolled into one. Boaz makes sure there's no way anyone could dispute it later, and the community gets to bless the act as well. And here's the best part, the elders and the people offer blessings. They're like, "May the Lord make Ruth like Rachel and Leah, who built the house of Israel. May your household be prosperous and famous in Bethlehem, and may your family line flourish like Perez's descendants." Think about that for a second. This is a public affirmation of their future together. It's like the entire town is standing there cheering them on, wishing them a thriving, blessed family. It's beautiful because it's not just a legal transaction. It's a celebration of love, legacy, and community. And Boaz, by carefully orchestrating the whole thing, makes sure that the redemption of Ruth is recognized not just legally, but socially and spiritually too. It's also kind of fun to imagine the scene with a little humor sprinkled in. You've got the elders sitting there, maybe adjusting their robes, listening intently. The closer relative, probably a bit embarrassed, handing over his sandal and realizing he can't wiggle out of this responsibility. And then Boaz, calm and collected, taking the sandal, orchestrating the witnesses, and announcing everything publicly. The tension, the relief, the anticipation, it's all playing out like a well-directed scene in a movie. And the whole sandal ritual, plus having witnesses, really emphasizes how important accountability and transparency were in their society. It's a reminder that even when we deal with personal, emotional, or life-changing matters today, having witnesses or a public acknowledgement can protect everyone and honor the commitment. Boaz isn't just being legalistic, he's making sure that Ruth's redemption is respected, celebrated, and fully recognized by the community. It's a mix of clever strategy, respect for tradition, and genuine care for Ruth. So, in this moment, the story is really alive. You can feel the suspense, the cleverness of Boaz's plan, and the joy of Ruth and Naomi as the process concludes successfully. The sandal, the elders, the blessings, it all comes together to show that redemption is not just a personal matter. It's something that touches the community, honors God's law, and celebrates life and love. And honestly, watching it unfold is kind of like seeing a masterclass in patience, strategy, and heart, all wrapped into one beautiful human moment. Alright, now let's get to one of the sweetest parts of the story, the birth of Obed, the son of Ruth and Boaz. So after all the legal stuff, the city gate negotiations, and the clever sandal exchange, we finally see life and joy entering the story. Ruth, who had been widowed and had such a difficult path, now gives birth to a son, and you can just imagine the relief and happiness that fills the household. This isn't just any baby, it's a tangible sign of redemption and blessing, a promise fulfilled in such a human and heartfelt way. Naomi, Ruth's mother-in-law, is over the moon. I mean, picture her expression, years of loss, bitterness, and loneliness. And now she's holding this tiny little bundle of hope. The text says she laid him on her bosom and became a nurse to him. Now, that doesn't literally mean she breastfed the child, she's elderly at this point, but it does mean she took on the loving, caring, guiding role. She was there to nurture him, support him, and, in a way, be his second mother. It's a beautiful picture of family stepping up, of community stepping up, and of love in action. Naomi's joy is palpable. She sees in this child the restoration of her family and the fulfillment of God's promise. And then there's the name Obed. Names in the Bible are never random, and this one's no exception. Obed means servant of God or worshiper of God. So every time Naomi, Ruth, or the community refers to him by name, it's a reminder of God's faithfulness and mercy. It's like a constant living declaration of gratitude and recognition that God has been at work, taking what was lost and making it whole again. You can almost hear the neighbors, friends, and relatives murmuring, "Obed, little servant of God, you're a blessing to us all." Speaking of neighbors, the community is involved in celebrating this birth too. You get the sense that this wasn't a quiet, private moment. It was something everyone rejoices over. People knew Ruth, knew Naomi, and witnessed the hard journey that brought them here. The arrival of Obed is a collective celebration of hope, continuity, and life restored. It's kind of like when a whole neighborhood gathers to welcome a new baby today, bringing food, gifts, and well wishes. There's laughter, excitement, and a lot of gratitude in the air. And Naomi's personal reaction is particularly touching because it's layered. Like, she isn't just happy about the child himself, though of course she is, but she sees in Obed the redemption of Ruth's life, the survival and continuation of her late husband's family line, and the fulfillment of God's promise. It's almost overwhelming joy. She knows that this boy represents so much more than just a birth. He's a living symbol of grace, faithfulness, and hope coming to fruition. And she takes her role seriously, making sure he's supported and cared for as he grows. She's literally restoring life to her household through her love and attention. It's also fun to think about the small, human moments here. Maybe Naomi is bustling around the house, making sure Ruth has everything she needs after the birth, adjusting blankets, holding the baby, laughing, crying, and just marveling at the miracle of it all. The women in the town probably pop in to see the baby, coo over him, and offer their blessings. There's chatter, excitement, and a real sense of community woven into this moment, which makes it feel alive and relatable. You can almost hear the joyful exclamations, the small jokes, and the shared happiness echoing through the neighborhood. And again, the name Obed carries so much meaning. It's not just a name, it's a proclamation. It reminds everyone that God has not abandoned them, that he redeems lives, and that even in circumstances that seem bleak, there is hope. Every time someone calls him Obed, they're affirming that this child is part of God's plan, a continuation of the family line, and a living blessing that ties back to the larger story of God's redemption in Ruth's life. So when you read this part, it's easy to just skim over the birth, but it's really a key moment. The narrative pauses here to celebrate life, family, and community. It's tender, joyful, and deeply symbolic. Ruth's journey, Naomi's care, and the community's rejoicing all converge in this one child, Obed, who is more than a baby. He's a beacon of hope, a testimony of God's faithfulness, and the start of a line that will eventually lead to King David and beyond. And just imagine the laughter, the tears, and the relief in that home. It's a really, really human and touching scene, showing us how redemption and joy can unfold in ordinary, everyday moments. Okay, now here's where the story really starts to blow your mind a little. So we've got Obed, born to Ruth and Boaz, right? And Obed isn't just any kid, he's the father of Jesse. And Jesse, he's the father of David. Yeah, that David, the one who becomes king. Wait, think about that for a second. Ruth, a Moabite widow who had lost everything, who came from a foreign land, who had no husband and was completely vulnerable, now becomes the great-grandmother of King David. Now, can you believe this? It's kind of wild when you step back and see the lineage unfold, and it doesn't stop there. This genealogy is super important because it sets the stage for the messianic line. King David isn't just a great warrior and king, he's also a central figure in God's plan for salvation history. And 27 generations later, Jesus Christ is born from this very line. So, when we look at Ruth, a woman who might have seemed like an outsider in every sense, foreign, widowed, and vulnerable, God is using her to bring about something monumental. She's literally woven into the story that leads to the Messiah. That's incredible, right? From her struggles to this legacy, it's like watching redemption and purpose unfold in a very real human way. Think about the odds for a second. Ruth is a Moabite, which in her culture and in Israelite culture would have been seen as a bit of an outsider. And yet, God works through her life in such a powerful way. She's not just included in the story, she becomes a central figure in the lineage of Israel's most famous king and ultimately in the genealogy of Jesus. That's a huge statement about grace, inclusion, and how God's plans can transform someone's life, even from the most unlikely circumstances. And then there's Obed. His birth isn't just a personal joy for Ruth and Naomi, it's a moment with ripple effects across generations. Obed carries forward the family line, and through him, Jesse is born, and through Jesse, David. Every step in this genealogy shows that God's hand is guiding the story. It's not random. Each generation has its place, and each person contributes to the unfolding of God's greater plan. Obed may have seemed like just a baby in Bethlehem, but he's actually a pivotal link in this chain that leads to the Messiah. It's both awe-inspiring and kind of mind-blowing when you think about it. Now, let's pause for a second and reflect on Ruth herself. She comes from Moab, a land where her people worshipped foreign gods and had very different customs. She could have easily been overlooked or dismissed in Israelite society. And yet, she chooses loyalty and faithfulness first to Naomi, her mother-in-law, and then to God, and her life becomes part of a line that changes history. Yet, there's something really powerful in seeing how God can take someone with a completely different background and, through acts of love and faithfulness, include them in his ultimate plan. Ruth is a living example of that. It's also interesting to see how God's redemption works on multiple levels here. Ruth's personal redemption and restoration with Boaz is one thing, but then God also uses her as part of a much larger plan for his people. Her life, her choices, her faithfulness, they all have significance far beyond her immediate story. And every time we trace this genealogy from Obed to Jesse to David, we're reminded of the continuity and faithfulness of God's plan. It's almost like each generation carries a piece of that divine purpose forward. And the storytelling here is just beautiful. We can imagine the awe in Bethlehem as people witnessed Obed's birth, knowing Naomi and Ruth had come through so much. And then, generations later, knowing that this line produces King David, the great king of Israel, and eventually Jesus. It's a story that shows how ordinary people, through faith and God's grace, become part of something extraordinary. That's the wonder and beauty of this genealogy. So, in a nutshell, Ruth's journey from a widowed Moabite to the great-grandmother of King David and ultimately an ancestor of Jesus is an amazing reminder of God's sovereignty and redemption. It shows how God can take someone from the margins and include them in the center of his plan. Every step, every generation, every person in this line matters. And Ruth's story is proof that God's plan can unfold in the most unexpected, awe-inspiring ways. It's wild. It's beautiful, and it's a story that makes you stop and just marvel at how carefully God orchestrates everything. Alright, so now let's talk about something really beautiful. The way Boaz in the story of Ruth kind of foreshadows or mirrors what Jesus does for us. And I love this because it makes the story feel alive. Like it's not just history, but a lesson in love, redemption, and sacrifice that's deeply relatable. Boaz is a kinsman redeemer, right? He steps in to protect, to care, and to restore Ruth. He sees her, a widow, vulnerable and outside the immediate safety net of her family, and he chooses to act on her behalf. That choice wasn't required of him. He could have walked away, but he didn't. And that's the part that really connects to Jesus. Think about it, Boaz pays a price. He invests himself, he follows the law carefully, and he goes through a process to make sure Ruth is redeemed properly. And Jesus, in a much bigger, infinitely more profound way, steps into our story too. Humanity is like Ruth, in a sense lost, vulnerable, in need of redemption. And Jesus comes, even fully aware of the cost, fully aware of the stakes, and redeems us out of love. It's not a transaction for him. It's a choice made out of care and deep commitment. It's almost the same as watching Boaz carefully navigate the sandal exchange and the city gate witnesses. Every move Boaz makes is deliberate, protective, and loving, and that mirrors the way Christ steps into our lives to secure our redemption. And here's a neat connection. Boaz doesn't just act out of obligation or because of the law. Sure, he follows the legal procedures, but his actions are motivated by love for Ruth. He wants to protect her, provide for her, and ensure her legacy. And that's exactly what Jesus does for us. His love isn't about obligation, it's about care. About wanting the best for us, about restoring us to fullness. The story of Ruth isn't just a romantic tale, it's a picture, a human scale glimpse of divine love. Boaz's tenderness to Ruth, his kindness, his careful planning, it's like a shadow of Jesus' love for us. It's relational, personal, and sacrificial. Now, let's talk about sacrifice, because that's a big part of the parallel. Boaz pays the price to redeem Ruth. He gives up resources, he invests time, and he takes on responsibility that isn't easy. Similarly, Jesus pays the ultimate price to redeem humanity. It's not silver or gold that secures our redemption. It's his life, his sacrifice, his blood. 1 Peter even talks about this, that we're redeemed with something precious, something beyond material value. That's the connection. The cost is real, the love is real, and the redemption is transformative. Boaz redeems Ruth and restores her future. Jesus redeems us and restores our relationship with God. And then there's the beauty of accessibility. Ruth had no power to redeem herself. She couldn't navigate the legalities or the inheritance issues. She needed a redeemer to step in. In the same way, we can't save ourselves spiritually. We can't fix our brokenness on our own. We need someone who comes on our behalf, someone who sees our need and acts. That's exactly what Jesus does. Just as Boaz saw Ruth and acted, Jesus sees us and redeems us. And there's something so comforting about seeing that parallel in a story that's so human, so earthy. It makes the divine connection tangible. You know, another layer is the relational aspect. Boaz doesn't treat Ruth as a problem to solve or a duty to complete. He treats her as a person with dignity and respect, and he engages with her gently. That mirrors how Jesus interacts with us. Redemption is never cold or impersonal. It's relational, tender, and full of care. It's about restoring life, not just fulfilling rules. So when you step back and look at Ruth's story through this lens, you can see the human-divine connection really clearly. Boaz is a tangible human picture of what it means to be a redeemer, and Jesus fulfills that on a cosmic scale. Ruth represents humanity in need. Boaz represents the redeemer stepping in with love and sacrifice. And together, it's a story that shows the beauty of redemption, care, and divine purpose. And honestly, seeing it this way makes the story of Ruth even richer. It's not just history or a romance. It's a living lesson on how God redeems, restores, and loves in ways that are personal, costly, and transformative. So there you have it, the final chapter of Ruth. Full of love, redemption, and God's amazing grace. From Boaz stepping in as the kinsman redeemer to Ruth's life being restored and Obed being born, it's a story that shows how hope, care, and divine timing come together in the most beautiful ways. Take a moment to reflect on how these lessons can resonate in your own life. And hey, if you enjoyed diving into this story with me, consider liking and subscribing so we can explore more amazing stories like this together.